All right. Thank you all for coming to Red Hat tonight for our AITP event. Thank you, Jordan, our Red Hat host, for our fabulous. We love our field trip. Who got to go out on the rooftop and take a picture? You did. Did you enjoy it? But you got a good view, right? I did not go out there. I'm going to go out later. All right. For those of you who have been here before, you know that I have an amazing team of volunteers on our board that help us put on these shows. Shout out specifically to our friend Jerome for tonight. It takes a lot of extra logistics for us to take a field trip to an amazing place like Red Hat to do an event. And Jerome was here with our speakers and Jordan and coordinated all the logistics, all the little extras, the parking validation and security and NDAs, just to make it a smooth experience for everyone. So thank you, Jerome, and thank you to my amazing board of volunteers for always working hard to put on a great show. We also have a advisory board of CIOs, our MAC. We're actually meeting later this month, October 25th, I believe, for our fall MAC meetings. We meet twice a year. They give us help and guidance on tech trends, programming topics, speakers. We tell them what we've done, what changes we've made, what plans we have, and get their advice. So it's a really good collaborative group. So this is our MAC. And those of you that also have been here a while know that we are now a national organization again. We are one of 11 chapters. There is a new website, AITP.org. So just like ours, AITP-RTP.org, there's the national site now, which is cool that we're brought back together and that we're part of something larger than just what we do here in RTP, especially for those of us in the room that work for companies that have an office presence or a global presence or a larger presence outside of RTP. And we're looking to add, I think we have 2 more chapters interested in joining later this year. So Las Vegas and Dallas. So actual cool destination cities.
Jerome, field trip.
And they also do a lot of virtual events. We're going to have a better library of resources and pre-recorded videos. And so if you're going out there to look for additional learning topics, programming, speakers, things to attend virtually, check out the new national website. We also have a job board. I know a big part of our tech economy and tech community here is job seekers and people finding jobs. Our CRM that we use has a job board function that we turned on. And so if you work for an organization that is hiring, you should have a blue dot on your name tag. Raise your hand if you are a company that is hiring. So there's companies that are hiring. If you would like to put one of your jobs on our job board for our audience, there's a lot of people here that are in transition. We know it's been a tough year and a half in the tech market with lots of layoffs and restructuring. So if you have a red dot or are a job seeker looking for a new job, raise your hand. Those of you that just raised your hand before, look at all these people that you could be recruiting. So we like to be the community to connect people. And this is just another way to add value to our community by having our job board. And I'm in charge of that. So if you want to know more, that's how you find me and email me. And we also started a new membership referral program. So members are the lifeblood of our community. We love our guests. You are welcome to continue to come as a guest, but I love a deal, and it's a little bit more cost effective to be a member rather than paying the guest fee every month for our events. So we're always looking to add new members. We love growing by referrals. We have a lot of great people in our community that bring a lot of members. Shout out to John O'Connor because he has brought a lot of members. So we decided to do a referral program to help reward the referee and the referrer. So this is how that works. If you bring a guest that's not a current member and they join as an annual member within 30 days, so in between today's meeting and next month's meeting, then we will give you an extension on your membership. So our memberships are annual memberships. So instead of, you basically get 2 months free. It's not like free. And then the person that was referred that signs up for their annual membership gets a 13th month for free. So everyone wins. We also have started surveys. Some of you have seen these surveys. I do want to tell you, these surveys are anonymous. We do not know who gives the notes or the feedback. Only the board sees it. And we learn from these surveys, and we can incorporate changes, make better decisions, make sure that we're adding value, make changes to our programming, our speakers, our topics, our food. There was some comments about the food from the last event. So we would love to hear from you and expect to see those surveys after each event. And then once or twice a year, we expect to survey our members just to make sure that we're adding value and that you're getting what you paid for. Speaking of members, we have some new members. If you are brave enough and want to raise your hand if you're on this list as a new member in the last 30 days. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. We're excited to have you.
3 of those are referrals, by the way.
So our referral program is already working. Success. See? Love it. Love it. So our referral program is already working. And some of you will already get an extra month or 2 months for free. Great. If you are not a member and you're a guest, here are our membership types. The quarterly membership is our try us out. It's like, we're not really serious. We're just going to date for a little. Like maybe you're in transition, maybe like 90 days. We're going to see if we like it. Like this is a great time of year to like just try us out. It's basically buy 2 months and get one free, right? Why would you not? So 90 days for $90. Or there's the annual membership, which is the best value because you get 12 months of programming, great networking, decent food, amazing programs and topics. And if you can't come, then you can proxy your seat and send your friend. And we also have group memberships. So this is more like the corporate membership kind of level. We have several companies that have joined us as a corporate member, and they rotate those seats. So State Employee Credit Union, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Kimberly Horn, Candle Science, Robert Half, are our corporate members. And so they rotate those seats as a reward or continuous learning opportunity. If you are interested in group membership, see Brooke. And then sponsors, we're going to talk to Beacon Hill, my friend Alec at Beacon Hill later today. Woo woo. We have several ways that your organization can partner with us. Put your marketing dollars to good use, be a part of the fun and build the community, support the IT organizations and community local to RTP. So several different ways that you can get involved. If you work for a company that has extra money at the end of the year left in your budget, no one has extra money at the end of the year. Not this year. Well, worth a shot. If you are doing budgeting for next year and want to add this line item into your budget for next year's marketing budget, these are the ways that you can support us, and we would love to talk to you more about how we can make sure that you're getting the most out of your sponsorship level, depending on your organizational needs. Corsica is our chapter sponsor for the year. Thank you, Corsica. And tonight is Beacon Hill. So hopefully you were able to stop by and meet Alec and Caitlin and the people and get some swag and talk to Beacon Hill. And now Alec's going to tell us a little bit about what they do.
Just click right here. Well, thank you, Kate and AITP, for hosting us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've been involved with AITP for a while now, and it's great to see some familiar faces and some new faces. And Brooke and Jerome and the whole team has just been great. And also thank you to Red Hat for sponsoring us. What a great building and opportunity. I also didn't see the patio, but I heard that it's great. So I think Beacon Hill is a fantastic partner for AITP because we have value for both job seekers here and the red dots in the room and the blue dots. And really that's kind of where we thrive, is in just making connections. We're a large company. We were founded in 2001. We have offices all across the United States. So we have kind of a national reach, but a local focus. I appreciate our team members back there, Katie and Caitlin, for showing and hanging out today. I know a lot of you got a chance to meet and interact with them. We're actually neighbors. Our office is right over on Fayetteville Street. So hopefully we'll get to interact with Red Hat much more at these events and also continue to interact with the group here. So our kind of company, see some numbers here and some data. We're a pretty large organization, consistently ranked as a top employer, a top place to work. And I think we really thrive on partnering with our customers and making sure that we're identifying those needs. We started as really a staffing and recruiting firm years and years ago, and since have evolved into more of a solution provider, consulting services, managed projects, and really trying to figure out how we can solve that talent gap, both for employers and for job seekers. We had a table out there. Thank you to those that stopped by. And we published an AI jobs report. I'm going to put up a slide at the end that has a link to that. So anybody here can kind of look at, in a topical sense, for what we're going to talk about with Scott and with Rami tonight, how AI is impacting job seekers and how it's impacting employers, and kind of tips and tricks as an employer, putting your resume online. What tools are companies using right now to screen out resumes, make sure you're getting to the right place, although working with Beacon Hill is a benefit in making sure your resume gets to the right place, but also for employers and how you can kind of interact with this new technology, how you can leverage it to improve your business outcomes and ultimately stay competitive, because I think it's obviously the hot topic of the moment right now and probably will be. So again, kind of started with our roots as a staffing organization, helping with recruiting. Since then, in working with large companies, medium companies, small companies, there was an increased demand for additional services and capabilities within Beacon Hill. So our business has really evolved to be very consultative, helping to manage projects, everything from a short-term kind of gap all the way up to managing a multi-million-dollar program and delivering for large organizations. We have several customers that are in this room right now and are looking forward to continuing to expand in Raleigh. These are some of our just kind of practice areas and some of the main focuses. We don't have a specialization. It's not like we're only applications or security or infrastructure. I think our process and the way that we interact with our customers and with our candidates is really what separates us from a lot of the other firms that are in the same space. And again, AI, I think I have some slides here on the next table. We have seen in the last 4 years, 300 different clients across 60 different industries coming to us to help them identify AI talent, machine learning, NLP, data science, some of the kind of newest and most innovative disruptive technologies. So we are working with 90% of the Fortune 100 companies in the United States to ensure that they can understand this new technology and how they can harness it to really improve their business outcomes. You see here another statistic that we have in the last 3 years. So since 2021, we've seen a 65% increase in customers coming to us for this expertise. So I think it's here to stay. Obviously, we'll hear from the experts in terms of how we can, deal with trustworthy AI and governance and making sure that we're keeping this, focused and formatted in the ways that are going to ultimately provide value. Again, this is on our website, www.bhsg.com. You can download it for free. Or scan the code here and it'll send me an email. I'll get you the report directly, but we'll let the grown-ups talk now. And I just appreciate the opportunity from AITP and from Red Hat to come out and hang out with you guys, and hopefully we'll be engaging with AITP for a long time to come. So thank you all.
Made me nervous. I was worried I was going to trip you on my cord when there's pacing. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Beacon Hill. If you haven't gotten swag, check out the swag, scan the QR code. And now I'm going to invite up my friends, Scott and Rami. Scott is an AI and ML consultant with 4 decades of experience in data science at IBM, data science and AIoT, really, with international clients working at IBM. So he did AI before AI was just a buzzword and cool, okay? And Rami is a cybersecurity risk management technology governance leader with some financial services, banking experience, 20 years experience, also global international clients. And so he's going to bring that security, compliance, and risk management take to it. So I'm really excited to learn from both of them about how do we adopt AI in a responsible way. We're going to switch over real quick. So quick change, take a stretch. Let you do that.
Yeah,
How's the sound? Can you guys hear okay?
Yeah.
I know that. There's a scooter in there. Oh,
I'm good for awkward transitions.
all right. Yep. There we go. Is it loose, the wire? Maybe?
It's like, I can. My favorite one. There. The weather one.
All right.
All right, I'm Scott Gerard, this is Ronnie Tom, and we're here to talk about trustworthy AI and governance. I want to give you a little bit of a background on this. How's that?
Nope.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Wanted to give you just kind of a quick little story here. You know, a year and a half ago, Elon Musk and 1,300 scientists said, this was just shortly after ChatGPT hit the airwaves. And they said, we need to pause generative AI development for 6 months. We need to do a moratorium because we're really concerned about the risks that are involved and nobody seems to have any understanding of how this is supposed to work. I never thought the moratorium was ever going to work, but I agreed with the fundamental premise of it. We need to understand this. And I was thinking, why don't all those AI guys figure out how this is all supposed to work? And the answer was, well, then it hit me, well, I'm one of those guys. I need to figure out how it works. So that was really kind of the wake-up moment for me for trustworthy AI. So I've been digging into this quite a bit in the last little bit here. We hope to convince you tonight that you also need to spend some time thinking about this. So if you're an executive, why do you need to worry about trustworthy AI? It's your business. You know, you need to be sure that you understand at an executive level, not at a detailed level, but you need to understand some of this technology so you can keep yourself out of reputational risk, financial risk, legal risk. And if you're a technologist in the crowd, you need to focus on it somewhat because you're going to be the guys in the trenches doing the day-to-day work. And you need to make sure that you're making trustworthy applications as opposed to untrustworthy applications. The one thing that we're going to do here today is we're going to, this seems like a very big, huge, amorphous, uninterpretable sort of a technology here. What we're going to do is we're going to provide you a framework where the idea is break this big thing down into, we have 7 pillars here, break it down into those pillars. Then you should focus on each of the pillars kind of individually so you understand them, and then you'll kind of begin to get this thing. So it's a divide and conquer sort of approach. So like I said, Kate already actually introduced me. I'm Dr. Scott Gerard, do AI and ML for all kinds of stuff. Love it. If you're interested, give me a shout out and we'll talk.
All right. Can everyone still hear me okay? All right. So I'm Rami again. Not going into the introduction again. I want to start with a quick survey with a show of hands. How many of you have started some sort of AI experimentation, project, journey at work? Cool. Quite a few. How many of you believe that you're done with that journey and you've gotten everything you're going to get? All right, good. No one. Good. I was nervous some people were going to raise hands. So can we go to the next slide, please? So regardless of what use cases you are looking at or how you're experimenting with AI, I thought this was an interesting slide because from a leadership perspective, it shows the value of AI in terms of filling in some hidden talent shortages. So this was a survey done by Microsoft where they asked the leaders where the biggest shortages are and how AI might be able to fill them in. And I have mixed feelings about cybersecurity being at the very top there, because I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But 61% of the leaders thought that there's a shortage in labor in cybersecurity. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a landscape on some of the main areas where AI will start to fill in some of those talent shortages, or in a different way replacing talent. So let me give you a little bit of a story of my experience with some of these technologies. My CIO comes to our town hall. This is risk management cybersecurity group, and he says, this is new technology. I hear there's a lot of potential with it, but I also hear there's a lot of risks, a lot of concerns. I don't know how essentially we're going to build a strategy around it. So there's three things he wants to solve, right? What is our strategy? How we're going to use it? Get some sort of governance around the use of technology. So it's not Wild West. And number three, when we do use the technology, what are the risks and how do we manage, right? But the thing is, the technology is not AI, it's cloud in this story. And this is years not 23 or 24, this is 2010, right? So the point I'm making is, we go through these technology cycles where we have new technologies coming up, and we have to figure out how to govern them, how to manage risk, and AI is no different. So again, like Scott said, we're going to give you a framework today to at least start that journey and think about these things the right way. Can you go to the next slide, please? So on that point, we've seen a lot of technology revolutions. There's an economist by the name of Carlota Perez, a Venezuelan British economist, who looked at the last 150 to 200 years, and she kind of found out that these technology revolutions, when they happen, there's a cycle, right? And with AI, we're kind of in that installation period, right? Where there's a lot of excitement and opportunity that people see, and in some ways, some pushback as well from incumbents who might say, oh, this is just a fad and it's going to go away, right? And then there's the deployment period where, and she focused on the financial capital side of it, how financial capital flows into these technologies. So right now in frenzy mode, you see a lot of AI startups, for example, right? So when the dust settles, we're going to be in the deployment phase where we're going to see things normalize in terms of the economy. Now, the key point I want to take away from this slide, one of the things she talks about is once or twice in a century, we have this opportunity to shape how a technology will be used for the future generations, right? Would it be used for the benefit of a few, or it will be used for the benefit of all, right? So that's the idea here. To make AI work for the benefit of all, you got to make sure it's used in a responsible and trustworthy manner. And that's the framework we're trying to present today. Over to, actually, I can quickly cover this. So this is a quick survey that I wanted to mention. Almost half of the employees surveyed here did not believe that their organizations will use and deploy AI in a responsible manner. So you have the need for doing it in a trustworthy way, but then there's not a lot of confidence, right? So for any of all the leaders here in this room, we need to make sure that the AI, the data is trustworthy, the models that we use are trustworthy, and the processes we wrap around those AI models and data are trustworthy. And how we do that is kind of the focus of this talk. So why don't Scott can maybe kick us off with that.
So if you take one thing away from this talk tonight, I think this is the picture. Trustworthy AI is a very big thing. It's amorphous. There's a lot of sub pieces in it. And we're going to talk about the 7 pillars there. Now, don't hold me to this because 2 of the pillars are kind of horizontal, but the pillars is the topic I'm going to use here. There's a lot of terminology that hasn't been kind of standardized yet. If you hear responsible AI, that's synonymous with trustworthy. And you will, if you look at other people's structures of how they do this, you will find that they kind of cut things a little bit differently. Don't get hung up on that, but these, I think, are the kind of the major ideas that you want to get focused on. And what I want you to really think about here is this is an amorphous topic. If you're an executive in this room, your number one thing that you need to do is to go create this governance board for that first one at the top. It's an organizational thing. It's a management thing. You just have to find some people and you have to put them on the board. That's phase one. Phase two is you want, if you think about this as a Venn diagram, and each of these 7 pillars are a circle, none of the circles overlap to begin with, okay? Think of it that way. Take each circle independently and kind of deep dive into it until you understand it. Of course, as time goes on, those circles are going to overlap a lot. But this is the picture that we're trying to leave you with today. And the first one here is this governance and risk thing. Many of you already have those kind of boards. The committee that we're talking about, if you want to fold that into an existing committee, fine. If you want to make it a subcommittee of that, fine. If it's a new committee, don't care. You just need to get people in place that begin to understand what these subtopics are all about so you can deal with it. Like I said, what we're trying to do here is a divide and conquer idea. And if you can find people inside your organization that are willing to step up and say, I really want to dig into one of these for you, great. If you don't and you need some external help, go do that. But I think the thing that you're trying to get this board to do to begin with is they need to define what your company's AI policy is. What is your policy going to allow? What are they not going to allow? How do they want to proceed, not proceed? Someone needs to come up with that, those AI policies, and I think this committee is exactly the right place to do that. Then what they need to do is they need to communicate that to the various different stakeholders. They need to educate the executives on what the executives need to know about it. They need to educate the data scientists, the operations team, all the various components so that they understand what role they need to be playing and train them on it, right? I can't read my stuff here. Oh, yeah. I think I was on a governance board many years ago on the AS400, and we had startup project reviews. You had to come to this board and you had to get approval. It was, you either got signed off or you didn't move ahead. We had a beginning of project, a mid project, and an end of project reviews, and you had to go through this process. That was just a way for us to keep things in control, but it was at a very big organization. Maybe your smaller organization doesn't want to have a formal checkoff kind of a procedure, but this board needs to be involved in watching what's going on so they can educate people saying, you know, I know you think you did a good job on this explainability, but you didn't really. Let me work with you and help you understand this, and we'll improve the project, right? So this is as much an education sort of a thing as it is a checkoff.
All right. So let's get into the risk management part a little bit. For me, the way I define risk is, as a business, if you've set some goals for yourself, your strategy and your direction, anything that can take you away from that is a risk, right? And you want to manage it. Now, in terms of the governance, if you're sitting here thinking, all I'm doing with AI is a very benign use case, I'm just using ChatGPT with public data, for example, why do I need a governance board, right? And you would be right in thinking that, but the point is, this is the kind of assessment that the board is accountable for doing, or should be accountable for doing. Because guess what? You might intend for the ChatGPT model to use just public data, but what if your personal data leaks into that, right? So you got to put in some cybersecurity controls, for example. The other thing that you would do to manage the risk is, as a part of the AI policy, you should define certain use cases that you think are out of your risk tolerance, right? You might say, we're never going to deduce, for example, emotions from data that we have on our employees. This is actually something that the EU Act prohibits. Similarly, anything where you're using personal data might automatically end up being high risk, right? So The point is you categorize your use cases based on the risk, and then you apply the rigor accordingly. So that's the key point here with this slide. Obviously, without going into a lot of detail, because I'm mindful of the time here, but I put in some areas of risk that you would definitely be thinking about. Cybersecurity, data governance. You got to make sure your data is clean and reliable. Your data lake is not polluted in some way. And the human oversight, which is a big thing in AI. You cannot run algorithms. You cannot make decisions through algorithms which don't have any human in the loop, because ultimately, guess what? The humans are the ones that are accountable, right? And then doing some of the other trustworthy pillars that we're going to go through. You start with the governance board and doing a risk assessment, and then you take on each depending on your risk level.
So the first one of these that we're going to talk about is correctness. This picture here is a very simple picture of what's called a confusion matrix. And let's say we're trying to decide whether a patient is at risk for cancer or is not at risk for cancer. The top row here is all of the people that are at risk. They're actually at risk for this. And the ones on the bottom row are the ones who are not actually at risk. The first column is, what did our AI model predict for that? If we predicted that they were at risk, then you're in the first column. And if we predicted that you're not at risk, you're in the second column. So we take all of the patients and we put them into these 4 boxes. Now, the best answer is, of course, that all of the people are in the solid green boxes on that main diagonal. That would be wonderful. Never happens. But there are people then that if you're a doctor and you're running like a Google-like search across your patients, right? You're going to type in the search, who's at risk here? It's going to come back with a list of people. The false positive people are the people who aren't actually at risk, but the model said that they were. So they're going to appear on the list, and the doctor's going to go, well, I guess I'm going to need to schedule a meeting with them. I'm going to have to run some tests on them. I'm going to have to go through all this stuff, right? It's not a good thing that they're on that list, right? The false positives aren't a good thing. But the false negative people are the people who actually are at risk for cancer, but they never showed up on the list. The doctor doesn't know they're out there. They never schedule any appointments. They never do any tests. The point of this slide is the false positives and the false negatives have very different costs. Yeah, you don't want the false positives, but you really don't want the false negatives. There are a number of different metrics that we can run to give you kind of a correctness score or an accuracy score. But if you go up to Wikipedia, there's 21 different metrics out there that you can use. And depending on what's important to you, you might need to choose a different one of the metrics here, right? This is a classification problem. If you're doing regression, there's different metrics still. And if you're doing generative AI, what do you want to measure? You want to measure whether it's truthful or not. Guess what? We don't have metrics that measure whether something is true. We have metrics that kind of correlate with it. They're kind of sort of like that, but they aren't really true metrics. So this whole correctness thing is important. Most of the AI people over the decades have been focused on correctness. And the whole thing about the 1,300 people wanting a moratorium, they weren't worried about this topic. But we need to focus on it because we're worried about hallucinations. We're worried about what are the uncertainty bounds on that. There's a lot of things about correctness that still need to be examined and understood. And we need to educate the people in our organizations that I know you think that you want to do accuracy, but that really isn't the metric that we should be going for. So there's a number of things there to do. Choose the right metrics and make them tied to your business. The next one is privacy. We got to keep the data private, right? All of the cybersecurity stuff that you're currently doing, keep doing that. It's still important. I'm not saying anything bad about that at all. We still need to do multi-factor authentication. We still need to do encryption, all of that kind of stuff. But AI has some new requirements and new ways and processes of how they do things. But there are also these other 5 different ways of things that we can do. Just a really quick example, suppose you're a hospital and there's you and 10 of your hospital buddies get together and decide, we want to build a model that is going to take all the, predict this disease. All we have to do is to find some trusted third party. We're all going to send our HIPAA patient data to this third party. They're going to run the model and send it back to us. Sounds really good? None of the hospital people I've talked to ever think that. You're not taking any of my patient HIPAA data anywhere. Federated learning is a way that the hospitals can partially train the models on their own with their own data under their own control, but they share the parameters of the model, and that's what is shared across the 10 different things. So there's a lot of different ideas for how to improve privacy. If you want to talk about any of these, please find me. I think it's a fascinating topic, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on.
Yeah, what I wanted to quickly add on the privacy point is from an AI perspective, we're going to talk about compliance in a second here, but going back to my example of cloud, yes, cloud was new, but it did rely on a lot of other things we were already doing. And the weaknesses in those areas kind of trickle into how we use cloud. So as an example, vendor management. If you don't have the right contracts with the vendors or even the legal framework, that will impact you how you use cloud, right? So AI is kind of similar in this aspect because privacy has existing laws and regulations, right? Anyone familiar with GDPR? So in the UK and the EU, there's a GDPR, General Data Privacy Regulation. California has a similar law called CCPA, which is Consumer Privacy Act. But guess what? Some of the stuff we're discussing here is actually required by law. So if you have data on EU or UK individuals, or even California, if you do business there, you're required to make sure your data is accurate. The accountability part that we touched on is in there. And then it has like 7 principles, so without going into each of them. So the point was, don't think of AI as something that's not regulated or there's no rules or laws around it, because there's existing frameworks that you can use.
Yeah, I know that there's an act that they're working on up in Virginia that if you sell applications into a state agency in Virginia, they have some rules they're talking about. I spoke with one of the representatives here. They're talking about maybe doing some kind of regulations in North Carolina. Us computer scientists have been free from regulations for a long time, but I think that's coming to an end. So fairness is the next one. Fairness and bias, they're the opposite sides of the same coin, really, right? So there's been a lot of public discussion about fairness in the last number of years. If you remember, North Point has a company, they created a program called Compass, and this was recommending sentencing guidelines for judges for defendants, right? And they had a pretty good case, I thought, for why they were being fair. I mean, they had statistics and it all kind of seemed to make sense. ProPublica didn't quite buy that, and they kind of ended up cutting this stuff a different way, and it showed that Black defendants were not being treated the same way that white defendants were, and it was really a big scandal, I don't know, 2018 maybe? Then a few years ago, we had facial recognition. Turns out that the facial recognition was really good if you had kind of light-colored skin. But if you had dark-colored skin, not so good. So a lot of people backed away from facial recognition. These are all fairness and bias concerns that people have. We don't know what a particular group, what value they should have for a particular metric, but we can compare groups together. We can compare the men against the women. We can compare the whites against the blacks, against the Asians, against the Pacific Islanders. There's a lot of comparisons that we can do, and you think, well, this is good. Are there metrics? Yeah, there's metrics. There's a lot of metrics. There's a paper I have that has over 20 metrics for ways to measure bias and fairness. The problem is they're incompatible with each other. You can't do all of them. You have to decide which metrics make sense for you and then go do them. I'll skip the 4/5 rule thing here, but If you really like this topic, this is a great book. And by the way, it's my favorite title of a book ever. It's Weapons of Math Destruction. And Kathy O'Neill does a great job. She used to be a quant on Wall Street, but she says that these WMDs have three attributes. One is they're opaque. These AI models, people don't understand how they work. We're going to talk about explainability in the next slide, so she's getting to that. Scale, if you've got a crappy manager and he does a really biased bad job of 20 people or 50 people or 100, it's not good. But these AI models will be applied at the city level, at the state level, at the country level. The number of people they're going to impact is going to be much bigger. And of course, there's also some kind of damage involved, right? So, we're doing sentencing guidelines. We're hiring or firing people. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a great book. If you've got students in high school, the chapter in here on the U.S. News and World Report's college survey and how they rank colleges, really interesting reading. There's some stuff in there that you would think, well, that ought to be in there, and it's not. So anyway, fairness is a really important topic.
And I'll just add a couple of quick examples here that I think are fascinating for AI, because what happens is, ultimately, I think it's the human bias that can trickle into our technologies and AI. So if you think about how AI works, it's the data that it's trained on. If the data is biased, AI model is going to be biased. So real life examples, Google was showing some high-paying job ads, and people found out that Google was showing more of those jobs to men than to women, because it was trained on a data where, for some reason, it made that bias. Similarly, in health diagnostics, if the data is not sufficiently representative of the population, there's real examples of where the AI model did not represent the minority groups as well as it did the rest of the population. So just a couple of examples. Real life out there, you can search them.
The next topic is explainability. Like I said, these models are opaque. Even explainability can be broken down into some different sections here. The first one is, as a developer and the development process, why did you make the decisions that you made? Why did you pick the metrics that you picked? It isn't necessarily right or wrong, but in a few years, if you get sued, you're going to have to come back and say, this is the thought process we went through. So that's one kind of explainability. The next one is, it's kind of being referred to as model cards, and you're supposed to think of it as like a nutrition label for an AI model. It's a very short, succinct description of what the model does, what it was never intended to do, so please don't use it for that. How does it work? What data was it trained on? There's a number of topics around that. The AI model is, the model card is usually 1 page, maybe 2 pages, so it's not really in depth, but it's intended kind of for end users, right? And the last one is, that's all nice, but here's an example. How did you come to the conclusion that you came to for this example? How did the model decide that this was the right answer? So let me show you a picture here. This is an AI model that some people built, and they took an image of these animals, and the task was, which animals are wolves and which ones are husky dogs? Well, they ran through this, and as you can see, 8 out of 10 of them we got right. I'm pretty happy as a data scientist that we got 8 out of 10. But the next thing is, well, can we do better? Why did we get these 2 wrong? So if we look at this example here, we've got this image. It's actually a husky. And there are techniques to say, here's a neural network. Help me understand which pixels in the image were really important in deciding what the classification of this thing was. And for this image, it's the white pixels. It turns out that the wolves were predominantly filmed against snowy backgrounds and the dogs were not. And that's why the model is doing what it's doing. Do you trust this model now?
No.
I've explained it to you. Don't you trust it? Of course not, right? Explainability is something that you have to do a good job here. And this one's you.
Yep. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? So compliance, I touched on some of these points earlier. I mentioned a survey where close to 50% of the employees did not believe that their companies will implement AI in a responsible manner. Similarly, there's roughly 1/3 of the employees that believe you do need regulation to make sure that things are done in a trustworthy manner, right? And this is a Gartner estimate that in a couple of years, we're going to have roughly half of the governments around the world enforcing responsible AI. So the point is not just optional. If you're planning for the next year, 2 year, 5 years, you got to absolutely think about these things. Now, EU Act, AI Act, I mentioned a minute ago, it actually defines certain use cases that that are considered prohibited. There are other use cases that are considered high risk. And if you are doing a high risk use case, there's very prescriptive guidelines on what you need to do. Now, obviously, we're not in Europe, but the reason I mention that is Europe, in terms of regulations and especially technology regulations, has been kind of at the leading edge of it. And generally, the stuff you see there, sooner or later, will come here as well. So that's an interesting one to look at. It's already been signed into law. One example we do have in New York that I mentioned here is New York City has a law on what they call doing bias audits. Anytime you use automated decision making on hiring, you're supposed to do a bias audit. So this is back to accountability. This is back to making sure your data is accurate, make sure there's a human in the loop, and that's what New York City requires. Now, ironically and interestingly, it's not going very well, because if a company is using AI for making those decisions and they're not doing the bias audits, how are the prospective employers going to know? They don't, right? So if it's an opaque process, there's no real good way to challenge them, but sooner or later these things will work themselves out, right? Some insider might be a whistleblower or something, right? So you got to be thinking about these things. I mentioned GDPR and CCPA a minute ago, so I'm not going to bore you again with that, and think over to you for the next.
One of the things I mentioned early on is if you think of these Venn diagrams of these circles as not overlapping, this is the one that's probably going to impact every other circle very quickly. Most of you probably already have privacy and compliance overlapping in your organizations, but a lot of, bias is going to be overlapping with this. So it is going to get merged together, but start simple. So the last topic we want to talk about is ethics. Now, there is an ethicist here in the crowd that I'm very happy to have met, and I hope to learn more from her. But so what is ethics? Ethics and morality typically mean essentially the same thing. If an author wants to draw a distinction between them, it's up to the author to make that distinction. There isn't any, really good, clear definition of what is morality versus ethics. The one thing that you might say is that morality usually has more of a religious overtone and ethics has more of a secular overtone, but they're basically synonyms. And the idea is we're discussing what is right versus what is wrong, what is evil versus good, what is virtuous versus vice. That's what we're trying to get to with this whole ethics thing. Now, there are 3 leading theories about how to approach ethics. The first one is consequentialism, and this is really, how to do the most good for the most people, right? As a technologist, I always see this spreadsheet forming in my mind that we could compute this thing, right? But that's just really not enough here.
Going back.
Oh, I'm going backward. That's right. There we go. If you like movies, I love Denzel Washington. I think he's a great guy. The movie Crimson Tide is a great movie. A lot of people think that this is primarily about utilitarianism. The captain's trying to do one thing and the first officer's trying to do another. That's really interesting. The second theory is deontology, and this is the idea that if you're following the rules, you're being good. If you're not following the rules, you're being bad. I think Crimson Tide also talks about that. One of the people in the movie is not following the rules, and he has pretty good reasons for doing that. But that's a different theory, right? It's very different from the most good for the most people. And the last one is virtue ethics, which is if you can think of a virtuous person, what would that virtuous person do? You're not really looking at rules. You're not looking at the greatest good for the greatest people. But what would a virtuous person do in this situation? And that's what value ethics are about. And if you watch the Denzel movie Equalizer, I think that's an interesting example here, because is it virtuous for a person that's virtuous, would they kill multiple people? That kind of hits that one head on to me. And I think that's a really interesting idea. However, these three high-level theories are great as far as they go, and they may kind of inform some discussions. But as far as I've seen, I've never seen an ethics checklist. This is just, you got to get a bunch of people together and talk it out. What group are you going to go to talk it out? I think you're going to the governance board. You've got people with all of the different technical skills together, and the privacy persons to go, but we need to do this for that reason. And the correctness people goes, well, we should be doing this for that reason. Talk it out, talk it through, and try to come up with what you think an ethical answer is. So again, this is our picture that we're trying to leave you with. You have to have effective governance. And I think a board of a lot of people with various different responsibilities and interests and diversity is really important to do that, because we need to make sure that the data is trustworthy. We really haven't touched on that much. We need to make sure the AI models are trustworthy. We've done more of that here, and also the process, right? But like I said, I think the one thing that if you're a business executive, the takeaway is if you don't have a group kind of like this, you need to form one. And it's just a management thing. It's just an organizational thing. Get the people together and let them go do some stuff.
And the one comment I will leave you with is we've talked about being unbiased today, but the one thing where I think you can be biased is towards action, right? So don't start your journey, right, is the point. So hopefully the framework we've presented helps you in defining that roadmap and getting started on that journey.
There's good bias and there's bad bias.
Yes. Questions or thoughts if we have time. Okay.
Speak. All right, so you're talking about frameworks, and ISO is now created a framework in 2023 to try to replicate what they did with information security management system. Now they've got the artificial intelligence management system, 42001. How long do you think it'll take that sort of framework to be adopted by U.S. companies?
I would ask, how long has it taken for the security one to be adopted? Because I don't think it's one of the most widely adopted frameworks for security, but I think there's still a lot of people that aren't using it. I expect the same thing for this kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, and generally speaking, ISO is more international. Europe is usually the first one here. Like, for example, in security, SOC 2, if you think about, especially for cloud, SOC 2, I think, is more prevalent than ISO. And a lot of people will say we align with ISO 27001. So I don't know the answer to your question, but with frameworks like this, I think of them as a guideline, which even if you're not certifying against them, it's a good kind of benchmark for you to look at and see our bases covered, right? So similar to the framework we're proposing.
Other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about, I guess, or better understand the difference between fairness and ethics. For ethics, you'd mentioned right or wrong, good or bad. That sounds a lot like fairness to me. So just, I guess I better want to be able to differentiate the two. Do you have any thoughts on that?
To me, fairness is comparing one group against another group to know which are they the same. Ethics is much more fundamental. Like, we shouldn't be doing that to this group, regardless of what happens to any other group. But this is another case where those circles have really begun to overlap again. And I think it's interesting to kind of try to subdivide them out and try to build a partition between them. But I think fundamentally it's flawed because they're all kind of interwoven with each other.
Only thing I would add is ethics to me is might be part of your strategy, right? So if you're a company that wants to be associated as a socially responsible company, there are certain things you might say we're not going to do, right? So that's kind of how I look at ethics. Now, fairness is more into when you actually apply the models, the decisions the model is giving you, are they fair? Do they fairly represent the population you're trying to represent?
Thank you, both.
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciated the trustworthy AI slide and amazing slide. And I actually wanted to continue on adoption and actual risks. And one risk is adoption. Really, right now I'm attending 3-day conference at Duke University on AI in healthcare innovation. And apparently healthcare is one of those most reluctant industries to adopt AI. And second is trustworthy, right? And I'm talking about trust that is, for example, robotic surgeries or self-driving cars. Who is taking responsibility for a mistake?
So some people couldn't hear the question, but I think you're saying even through AI adoption, there are certain risks to the society, and who is accountable and responsible for those risks? Is that the question?
One is adoption, meaning industries they're actually reluctant to adopt, or it will take forever, for example, in medical or healthcare to adopt.
Right.
And second is who's going to take the blame for the mistake?
Right.
I think accountability, not responsibility, but accountability is very important here. In many cases, I want a person's name of one throat to choke, right? That you didn't do all the work, but you reviewed it and you personally signed off on it, right? I think that's really important. But when you get to a large corporation, I'm not sure that a person's name is appropriate, but certainly the company is responsible, and you can sue them for millions of dollars or whatever, right? That's a pain that it's like, I don't want that pain, so I'm going to make it more responsible. The other thing I will say is, I think adoption is an interesting attribute of a program, but I don't think it's a trustworthy attribute. What we tried to do in this one is, I can have a trustworthy program that no one adopted. I can have a trustworthy program that's completely unsustainable. I can have a trustworthy program that meets, that is unusable from a user experience perspective. Those other attributes are important, but we were trying to focus in just on this trustworthy thing, because I think each one of those topics, if you don't have that, I don't see how you can call it trustworthy. But the other things are important too. And so that's why having this part of a bigger governance board where you have people focused on those other topics might be appropriate.
I think it's the human in the loop, right? Like you can use AI to get you all the data and to draw some conclusions, but you still need a human to make the ultimate.
For the accountability, yes.
Right? You can have the car that's self-driving, but like you still have to be paying attention and stay behind the wheel to intervene if the automated driving vehicle is going to hit a kid.
And in some ways, that's where the regulations play a part in there. I mean, we all know that wearing a belt is a safety thing, but it wasn't until it was required that a lot of people started doing that, right? So the fatalities from car crashes where people weren't wearing seatbelts, was an issue. So anyway, just an example, but we'll see how it plays out. Yeah.
So with all this data that's coming into our world today, and ChatGPT is probably the most well-known tool that's out there at this moment. I mean, is there a way for just the common user to tell whether it's trustworthy or not, the results of a question that you ask, or or you're asking it to do some certain thing and it puts out results? And oftentimes I look at it and I'm like, well, that can't be right, or or maybe it is right. So how do you even tell? today? It's so young.
That's a great question. I think it's even a little bit challenging for corporations to do this because, like I said, the metrics for correctness, the non-hallucination part, we're not actually testing for truth. The only thing I can suggest from a personal point of view is pick a topic that you know well, that you're an expert in, and start asking ChatGPT questions about it. If it comes back and is doing pretty good, then, you know, it's probably doing pretty well for other stuff as well. If it's all over the map, then you have your answer. The problem, of course, will come in that most of us go in and say, I don't really know about this. Let me start asking questions. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. ChatGPT is very confident about its wrong answer. You have to know that. I mean, I don't know any other way to do this, but the model cards would also be one way to do that. You know, what's the model card?
Real quick, the IBM Red Hat generative AI model, Granite, cites the sources.
Yeah.
It does. One way you can look at it. The model's gonna actually.
But aren't they saying that about 20% of it is hallucinations at this point, statistically? 20%. I mean, you brought up an 80-20 rule before. That's what I'm hearing. Hallucination, 20% inaccurate.
There's a group called Vectara, and they have an AI correctness leaderboard. And the best one right now, I think, is ChatGPT 4.0, and it's like 2.5% error rate. And you say, well, that's pretty darn good. All that means is that about 1 out of every 40 answers is going to have hallucinations in it. So, you know, one of the reasons I think the medical community is concerned about it is if you tell a person, no, you don't have cancer, but they do, that's a really bad thing. If you say, you know, I really like Denzel Washington movies, and it comes back and it says, you really ought to watch the Barbie movie. What's the real cost of that to me, right? I wasted 2 hours, not a big deal. So that's where this whole risk thing comes into play. And that's why, you know, financial, legal, medical are much more concerned about it, as they should be.
And is it true that the structuring of the prompts make a difference in hallucination? So you can get 50% or 20% or whatever hallucinations depending on how you structure the prompt. But you can also refine it and refine it and refine it and be better at your answers.
Or worse.
Yeah, it can hallucinate much more creatively. I think there's some truth to that, but I don't have any rules to say, well, don't ask it that way because that you're just asking for hallucinations. You know, I know how the thing is built. I just don't know why it does what it does so well most of the time.
There's a new training methodology that they're using called reinforcement learning from human feedback. Could that be a good, could that help with trustworthy AI, essentially with helping train these models to be more ethical and such for future?
Maybe. The problem is the text that was fed into the application correct?
That's fair.
If you've got Wikipedia articles that people have just banged around with, right? It's going to take that as truth. And what people are concerned about is, what is it, a glass bubble, an echo chamber, that a lot of the stuff now appearing on the web is from ChatGPT. And they're going to use that to train ChatGPT. So it's kind of, you know, beginning to do that. It's a great technique. I'm not sure that it really is going to make a huge difference in the hallucination rate. It might help. I don't know.
One more question. Fairness?
Yeah.
We haven't done you yet.
All right. Speaking of ethics and moral decision-making, where do you draw the line in the sand for allowing, bless you, ethical and or moral decision-making by AI, if you allow it? And secondly, two more question, are there plans for a US AI Act similar to that of EU?
The White House came out with some guidelines. I think
That
it
was
was
very
last
high
year.
level though.
Very high level.
That was just be careful with what you do.
Yeah, it was almost vacuous, but
Biden put that out, what, 3-4 months ago?
Well, given how great we work across the aisle, I think it's gonna be a while.
We have to play by EU rules,
Yeah.
but we don't have any. Except for California that you mentioned that I was unaware of.
The thing about the ethics is Aristotle has this idea of a golden mean. And the thought is, if you focus 100% on, get it out the door as fast as possible, cheapest as possible, maybe there's some bugs in it. If you focus totally on that, well, clearly that's not the right way to do it, right? The other option is this governance board goes absolutely ape crazy and says, you're not getting out unless every ethical T has been crossed and every ethical I has been dotted. That's also wrong because in both cases, the company is going to go bankrupt, right? There has to be a point in the middle, what he calls the golden mean, where, yeah, we're doing some practical stuff, but we also have to be kind of ethical. I would actually encourage these governance boards to start out more on the practical side and to kind of move in, right? Because if the governance board comes down and hammers the programmers and the data scientists and say, you're not doing this until blah, blah, blah happens, they're going to bitch to their managers and the whole thing is going to collapse. Their job is really to encourage people, to train people, to bring it up better than it was before and to try to work toward that, not to say, this is the point, this is where we're headed. If you're not there, you're not going to deployment. So I think it's a tricky management problem.
Yeah, I think whether regulation is passed or not, I think companies that do care about reputational risk, for those of us that are familiar with sustainability, social impacts that companies might be having on the society. If you start to think about, as a company, if you think about those things, then I think it's important and you will focus on trustworthy in my mind, even without the regulation. But I don't have the answer to your question, but that's kind of another way of looking
It
at
kind
it.
of dips into the opinion side of human intelligence.
Yeah.
It's a topic for another day.
This was awesome. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Scott. And Bob. I think we all learned a lot. Like you said, ChatGPT is very confident, like my 12-year-old son, who, asked Alexa for an answer or watched a YouTube video, and now he thinks he knows more than me about driving a car. And all things. And all things. Thank you to Red Hat, Jordan. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to my fabulous board. Next month is November 14th. Wade Minter from Dual Boot Partners, how to build a product that your customers will love is the topic.
At NC State, right?
Back at U Club.
Yes.
Even though we love having us here. Rami, as a speaker, you get a free 3-month membership, so you're welcome to join us at the November event.
Awesome.
And I didn't mention earlier, we will have one open seat on our board for next year. So if you love AITP and love what we do and want to be a part of our community and serving our community in a volunteer capacity, please reach out to me. I'm looking at we're playing musical chairs as a board. We like to move people to seats that they prefer, that leverage their skills and strengths. And we will have, I think, at least one vacancy when the music stops. So come see me in the next 30 days, president at AITP-RTP.org, and we can talk if you're interested in getting involved, helping us out.